Hi, guys. It's Carolyn. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm very excited about our guest, Eric Anderton, who is a construction-specific business coach. Since 2004, he has worked side by side with construction leaders to help them tackle their biggest challenges with clear strategic plans, a focus on developing top talent, and an unrelenting drive to execute key priorities. His clients have grown stronger and more profitable. His 30 years of entrepreneurial and business experience, coupled with 25 years of public speaking, small group facilitation, and one-on-one mentoring, have made Eric a trusted advisor to the construction companies, ranging from $5 million to over $3 billion in annual revenue. And you're also an author as well, right?
That's right. Yep.
So before we dive in, give us a little more background on how you got exactly where you are now.
Yeah. So I started working with contractors in 2004. I don't have a experience in construction, that is working in a construction company, but I started off with a leadership development program that many contractors in my area chose to participate in. The first client I worked with selling that leadership program was a construction company. They're still my client today, over 20 years later. And I started my own company in 2013 and pretty rapidly niched down to construction. And the reason I love working with construction companies is because they are straightforward, very practical, and that's my mindset as well. And I love the fact that my clients can drive down the road and point to something and say, I built that.
That's pretty an amazing feeling. So one of the big headlines on your website is, why do construction professionals struggle to be effective leaders? And so I'm really curious in the answer to that question.
I think they struggle because they love to build projects, and though projects have areas of gray in them, they typically are black and white. They have an engineering mindset. And then when they get promoted into leadership roles, building teams of people is a completely different skill set. And that's why they struggle.
So what does successful leadership look like? What does a successful leader, especially in the construction industry, do to lead their team?
They know and they understand that when they step into a leadership role, they have to accomplish more through other people. And typically speaking, when someone has been successful in construction, they're successful because they know how to solve the problems on projects that they're working on. But once they step into leadership roles, they have to stop being the problem solvers and start teaching others how to solve the problems. And that's the shift that they have to go through, from building the project themselves to building the teams of people who are now building the projects. And that shift is where the biggest challenge comes in.
Yeah, I mean, I think most contractors go into the industry because they love what they do.
Yeah.
Very fastly, if they're good at it, that doesn't become the thing that they do anymore. It has to move more towards the business side.
Yep.
So what steps do you take to develop that leadership? What is that? Where do you begin, and how does that work?
I think that the first skill that you have to develop is delegation. And delegation is different than abdication. And delegation works like this. I have to consider, when I'm delegating a task, the capacity of the person, their capability, and then also how clear I am in what I'm delegating. So first, I have to be able to clearly articulate what I want the person to do. They have to be capable of doing it. That is, they have to have the skill set necessary to execute the task that I'm delegating to them. And then they have to have the capacity as well. So typically what happens is, if I have an A player, I give him or her a ton of stuff to do, and I overcapacitate that person, and their performance then begins to decline. But if I'm clear, they're capable, and they have the capacity, I have then earned the right to say to them, here is a task for you to execute. Once I have delegated to them, the next step then is to hold them accountable. And that's where a lot of leaders struggle, because with accountability comes conflict. And so I have to be able to delegate and then hold people accountable. An accountability conversation is tremendously simple. You just have to ask, did you do it? If not, why not? How can I help? And the challenge with those accountability conversations is, as I mentioned, then conflict comes in. And most people are uncomfortable with conflict. They'd rather just get it done themselves. And if you're going to be an effective leader, you must be able to delegate, hold people accountable, and then go through the conflict and the difficult conversations associated with that accountability.
Okay, two things I kind of want to dive in a little bit more on. The first one is clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do processes? How do you suggest we give clarity around a role or around a project?
That's a great question. One of the problems when you step into a leadership role is that you are unconscious about how much you actually know.
Mm.
And so you have this deep well of competency that comes to you naturally or intuitively. And when you're communicating with someone, you may not share everything that you know about that particular task. And because you don't share everything you know about that task, you don't communicate it well, someone isn't able to execute the task at the same level of efficiency or competency that you have. And so what you have to be able to do is, when you're delegating a task, is get onto paper, if possible, what it is that you do both consciously and unconsciously. One of the great ways to do it is this. Get into ChatGPT and start talking to ChatGPT about the task that you accomplish. Talk about the process that you use, but then try and think through the intuitive, non-conscious aspect of what you're doing. And the best way to do that is this. Tell them the task, tell ChatGPT the task that you're using or doing, and then ask ChatGPT to ask you a number of non-obvious questions about what you're doing. Then answer those questions as well. And then after you've both put in some data, answered the questions that ChatGPT asks you, then what you do is, based on the responses that you've given to the questions, get me a standard operating procedure around this task that I'm going to delegate to someone who reports to me. And then, of course, with ChatGPT, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you give them garbage, if you give it garbage, it'll give you garbage back. But if you give it precise insights into what you're doing, you'll be amazed at the output that it gives you in terms of a standard operating procedure. And then look at it, see if it makes sense, and then ask it again to give it to you in such a way that you're able to communicate it to someone who is perhaps not an expert in doing this task. They might be doing it for the first time. And then it'll give you a very clear outline for how you should be communicating with someone, and it can be tremendously helpful to you.
That's an amazing way to think about it, because I know I, as a leader too, come to task and leadership with my own bias of like, everybody knows what I know.
Yes.
And then when they don't do what I want them to do, I'm disappointed.
Yes.
Which brings me to my next question.
Yes.
The accountability issue.
Yes.
So, like, when do you address the issue? Do you do weekly check-ins, monthly check-ins? What does that part of it look like?
Yeah. So the rhythm of accountability depends on a couple of things. Number one, it depends on the experience of the person that you're delegating to and your level of confidence in them. And number two, it depends on the critical nature of the task. So if this is a task that is time sensitive, money sensitive, safety sensitive, then I'm going to be more intensive in my check-ins. Mm-hmm. So if I've delegated someone a task and I need to know in the next 2 or 3 days whether there's progress being made, then I need to take that into account and make sure that I'm following up in an appropriate manner. So the competency of the person has something to do with it. And then also the sensitivity of the task has something to do with it as well, in terms of the follow-up.
Gotcha. So then for each player on the team, how important is it that they have their own set of goals that align with the company goals? Is that something that is that something that you would coach on, or I'm just curious?
Absolutely. So what you need to be doing, I have a tool that I use with all of my clients. I teach them the tool so that they can then teach the people that report to them. It's called a 90-day dashboard, and it's tremendously simple. The first part of the 90-day dashboard, and I can provide you a link so that your listeners can download the dashboard for free. The first part of it is just the rally cry. What is the one thing this person needs to accomplish in the next 90 days in order for them to be able to say with any credibility, I had a good quarter? Gotcha. And then after that, you identify 3 simple initiatives that are going to drive that rally cry, metrics that are associated with those initiatives, development opportunities that the person needs to take advantage of in the next 90 days in order to help them to achieve the rally cry, and then any critical relationships they need to focus on that are going to help them to achieve that rally cry as well. So you have the rally cry, initiatives, metrics, development opportunities, and relationships. You bring those all together and you work with the person who reports to you, coaching them through the dashboard so that they can co-create it with you. And then in your one-on-one meetings with that person over the next 90 days, you use the dashboard as that check-in reference, that foundation of performance. So the person has a goal that they need to achieve and they're driving towards that goal, and you're holding them accountable so that they can achieve that goal as well.
Wow. That's a lot. So like, say like I'm a construction company.
Yes.
I know that this is something that I'm weak on.
Uh-huh.
And I come to you, where would you start? Where do you start? Like,
Well,
if
yeah. Yeah. So I start with the person that I'm talking to. Obviously, they've got to be able to use this tool themselves for themselves. And so I'll co-create a dashboard like this with someone that I'm coaching and then hold them accountable for achieving it over 90 days. Once they get a feel of that, they're then able to coach other people, having used the tool themselves to achieve the goals that they're looking to accomplish.
So what are some other, we talked about clarity, accountability. What are some other important things to help us be effective leaders?
I think one of the keys is to understand how to use your time effectively.
What does that look like?
Yeah, and one of the big issues that highly competent people have is that they spend too much time doing other people's job. Okay. So when you get promoted into a leadership role, your role and responsibility changes. And as a result of that change, the way that you use your time should change as well. The problem is we allow other people to interrupt us and keep us from achieving our role and responsibility because either they're too lazy to execute their role and responsibility or they're incompetent in their role and responsibility. And so I need to be able to identify in the flow of my week where my interruptions are coming from and why those interruptions are occurring so that I can do whatever I can to stop those interruptions and keep myself focused on the things that only I can accomplish. If I have that mindset that I need to focus 80 to 90% of my time on the things that only I can accomplish, it will completely transform the way I look at my calendar and the way I manage my time.
Yeah. How do you, so, because that's mind blowing to me because I have, I'm interrupted constantly all the time.
Yes.
To try to, and honestly too, I find myself, if somebody's lacking in an area, instead of addressing it, I'll kind of take on the role.
Yes.
I'm impatient.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
is a better way to do that?
So that to me is it's short-term thinking. Okay, so let's assume that the person that is interrupting me is someone that I want in my company in terms of they're a cultural fit. I want them to be able to succeed. But for whatever reason, they're interrupting me. Perhaps it's because of competency. They need some training. Perhaps my communication hasn't been clear. I need to identify why they're interrupting me. And then I need to stop and go through the delegation process, knowing that there's going to be a time suck in that delegation process, going through the training process if necessary. But if I'm willing to invest the time up front in bringing that person's competency level up so that they can execute their role and responsibility, over time, that will begin to minimize the interruptions that I'm experiencing. And as a result of that, that will help me to stay focused on the things that only I can do. But there has to be an upfront investment in the development of my people and holding them accountable for their role and responsibility so that I can stay focused on my role and responsibility.
So companies that are going through growth that you're coaching and you're working with, and there's changes in roles.
Yes.
How do you prepare a person for a change in role and their job responsibility so they can be successful?
The first issue that you have to deal with is guilt. And let me explain what I mean by that. This is particularly true in construction. You would promote someone, let's say, who's been a foreman to a superintendent role. Mm-hmm. So as a foreman, he or she is likely on the job with the guys, building the work, getting hands dirty, being able to say, I started at point A and I finished at point B. At the end of the day, for good or for bad, at least I got something done. And that feels a certain way. That's why a lot of people get into construction, because they can say, I built that. Mm-hmm. When you get promoted into a superintendent role, you're supervising people and you're no longer actually building projects. It feels different. Mm-hmm. right? So you're in the trailer or in the office making phone calls or in your truck giving direction. You're not actually, quote unquote, working. You don't feel like you're working. And so then you feel bad about that. And because that feeling is unfamiliar, the new work feeling that you're getting is an unfamiliar one, you go back into micromanaging and getting your hands dirty, when what you need to do is stay out of the dirt, so to speak, and direct other people who are involved in those tasks. So the first thing you have to communicate to someone when they're being promoted is that the position that you're in is going to feel different than your previous position, and don't allow those feelings to drag you back into micromanagement so that you feel comfortable. You have to be uncomfortable in this new role for a while until you understand that the way that you're functioning is different than the way that you used to function.
Interesting. Because I mean, construction companies are always going through growth.
Yes.
And I know your book also touches on sales and marketing and how to set up a team for that.
Yes.
What does that look like in a construction company? Because I know that's a huge part of what most construction companies do.
Okay, so most construction companies don't go out of business because of a lack of work. They go out of business because they pick up the wrong work.
Wow.
Okay, so as a construction company, you must be crystal clear when it comes to sales and marketing. Right client, right job, right location. And if you're going to take on a project, you must have at least 2 of those 3 lined up. And if possible, 3 of 3 every single time. So, as we're growing, for instance, I might have right client, right job, but the client may be asking me to build in a location that I haven't been in before. And so I have to carefully consider whether or not to take that on, whether or not to sell that job to the client, because I know that if I go to a new location, I may need to find new labor in order to execute the work. I may have to bring in, have my guys travel, and that can create tension and challenges. And so the key when it comes to successful selling is right client, right job, right location. Filter all your opportunities through that. Present all of your marketing so that you are attracting the right clients with the right jobs in the right locations, and discipline yourself to take on those types of projects and to grow in a steady way that you can manage. Don't grow too quickly, because we know that if you take on projects that you can't execute well, it's not only going to affect your reputation with the people that you're building for, it's going to affect your profitability and your morale. So when you're growing through sales, you have to be wise in light of the projects that you're taking on.
So do you recommend like kind of being a niche contractor and be good at the one thing you do, or being a more general kind of taking?
Well, it really depends. I can't answer that question because some people thrive in being general. Obviously, there's general contractors, and some people thrive in being niche. I think you do have to define your niche, though.
Yeah.
And that niche, again, is right client, right job, right location. That's your niche. Once you have that niche defined, you can then execute in that niche. And of course, the niche can change and develop over time.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a question. So a construction company that needs help and comes to you,
Yes,
that need your help with leadership, what does that look like just to start off?
Yeah.
How do you evaluate what they need?
Yeah. So I think the key is there has to be a fit between someone like myself and the construction company. And the construction company has to have the right attitude. And let me tell you what the right attitude is. There are no magic pills when it comes to leadership. There's only incremental development over time. And so a leadership team has to have the right perspective. And the best clients that I work with, they come to me and they say, Eric, we're already achieving at a high level, but we want to take it to the next level. Right? So the best athletes in the world have coaches and a team that help them to get even better. Mm-hmm. And so I don't specialize in helping companies that are failing. So if you come to me and your company's on fire, I'm not the guy for you. But if you're a high performer and you want to get better, I'm exactly the right fit for that. And it happens in 2 ways. It can happen through leadership development programs. And my book goes into detail on all the programs that I offer in terms of describing what those key frameworks are. Or it can be executive coaching. So it can be a team approach, or it can be a one-on-one approach.
So like executive coaching, would it just be with the owner or like the management team?
It's a good question. It starts with the CEO, and it can cascade all the way down into the project manager level as well. So typically I work like this week, I've had calls from everyone from the CEO of a company to senior project leaders.
And so besides the coaching, what was the other type that you said your book describes?
A leadership development program. So I have a comprehensive leadership development program. It's tremendously straightforward. It's designed to give people practical things they can do to improve in their leadership communication, in their team building, in their time management, in building a high-performing team. Those practical, simple things that every construction leader needs to nail.
And is that like where the whole company goes through, or?
There's a variety. So I have an online course that people can take, which is, you can sign up your whole company for the online course. It's called The Shift. But then I also do customized training with smaller groups as well. So right now I'm doing a training class with a contractor that has goals to be $1 billion contractor by 2030. And they have their senior leaders in a Zoom session with me where we're meeting over 4 weeks or 4 sessions. And there's 5 or 6 people in there. So it's more intimate. And we're able to really get into some of the details of the challenges they're facing as leaders and help them to develop in a very proactive way.
So tell me about your favorite client success story on the leadership side of somebody who come in and like kind of work with their leadership and how they've grown.
Yeah. So there's one leader that I worked with he got promoted into a senior role. And frankly, he was uncomfortable in that role in terms of stepping into the executive office. Okay. So he had sort of a mindset that was, you might say, insecure. And it's normal, right? So, you get promoted from project manager to project executive, and all of a sudden you're in a meeting with a bunch of executives, and these are the people that you've looked up to for a number of years, or maybe you don't have a college degree and they do, and, they throw around big words, and maybe you're not familiar with the big words or something like that. And what we began to work through is like, listen, man, if you weren't a baller, if you didn't have some contribution to make, they wouldn't have promoted you. And so what you need to do is, prior to going into that meeting, you need to change your mindset. And the mindset should be, I have a contribution to make. And if I didn't have a contribution, I wouldn't be here. And so you need to step into those meetings tremendously well prepared, and then ready to answer questions that you get asked and ready to make a contribution. And don't be afraid to make that contribution, because the very reason you got promoted is so that you can bring your insights, your skills, and your abilities to the table and make a contribution to the executive leadership team. And so that's just one very small example of working through a process with this person where he had to change the way he thought about himself and his role in the organization, so that through that change of thought, there could then be a change of behavior. And this is one of the keys when I'm working one-on-one with an executive. Again, there's no magic pills, and you're not going to change by being given a list of 10 things that you need to do. There's just 1 or maybe 2 behaviors at the very most that you need to focus on in order to improve your performance, that if you make those changes, that will have the biggest positive impact.
So how do you find those things?
Yeah, you do that through a 360 process. I have a tremendously simple 360 process. It's not like there's so much in consulting, there's so much dusty binder crap, right? It's like you take a 360 that takes about 3 hours to do, and you get a massive dusty binder, and it means nothing. You do nothing with it. So what I do is very simple. I kick off executive coaching engagements like this. Give me the list of 8 to 10 people that I can talk to that are your peers, your direct reports, the people that you report to, and even people outside of the organization. I will schedule a 10-minute conversation with each one of those people, and I'll ask them 3 questions. What is it that you do best? What's one thing you can do different? What other advice do you have to help you perform better and be more successful? I'll interview them. I'll take notes on those questions, and then I'll synthesize those into a 360 report. That's 1 or 2 pages at the most. And through that process, we can identify typically one thing that this person is going to do to change their behavior in order to be more successful.
Wow, that's amazing. I think it's a different approach that I've never heard about before, but getting an outsider's perspective, because I think we're kind of, when we look at ourselves, we can't see everything.
Yeah, and so the 360 process, again, I don't want to overwhelm someone with a bunch of data and a bunch of information, because frankly, you're not going to use that information. You're just not going to use it. You have too much stuff on your plate already. What we're looking for is that one change, that one behavior, that if you use this behavior and if you implement it, it will have the biggest positive impact.
Pretty amazing. I've heard you mention a couple times mindset.
Yes.
How important is that for leaders or for anybody in a corporation?
Well, it's tremendously important because our behavior is a reflection of our mindset. So, out of the way that we think is the way that we behave. And so, if we can be thinking about the way that we perceive ourselves, we can then begin to understand why we behave in the way that we do. And so, part of the work that I do with my clients on a one-on-one basis is to really think through the way that someone perceives themselves. And if you have an understanding of those self-perceptions, then that really helps you to understand why you're behaving the way that you're doing, that you are, and through that understanding, make changes. So for instance, some people have certain perceptions. I can't trust people to get things done. I can't find good people. I always need to be right. I always need to be the smartest person in the room. I need to step in when things go slightly wrong. I need to be the hero. I often have to get my way by yelling. I can't show weakness. My employees are like children to me. All those kinds of limiting perceptions that people have, which can hinder them being effective leaders. I work with my clients to help them to identify those limiting perceptions, those limiting ways of thinking, and then reframe them in a positive way so that they can then be more impactful in the way that they interact with people. So for instance, if you think that you have to be the hero, you need to reframe that, and don't reframe it in this way. I need to stop being the hero. No, I need to start developing heroes. Okay. If I say I can't trust my people to get the job done, I need to reframe that and say, if I hire competent people, I can then delegate to them and allow them the freedom to get the job done.
That's an interesting point about hiring the right people.
Yes.
Do you do any coaching around trying to find the right people? Like especially in construction companies, always looking for the right people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously there's a war for talent in construction, and that war is never going to end, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done, and there's a limited set of people to do that work. So the first thing that you have to be clear on if you're going to successfully hire people is, what is our culture here? Okay, what is it? What is the culture of this organization? And your culture is not what you put on your website in terms of your values. Your culture is what you tolerate in your organization and don't tolerate. So you have to be brutally honest about what your culture is. So for instance, one of my clients has a culture of tremendous competition and high performance. And if you're not willing to be competitive and to grind and to work more than 8 hours a day, you're just not a fit for that company, even if you have the technical skills. Mm-hmm. So you have to identify what the culture of the organization is. Then you have to marry that with a clear description of the technical skills that someone needs and the outcomes that someone is responsible for in order to be successful. You marry those into a job description, and then you have to be ruthless in your interviewing process, where you ask great questions around your culture and great questions around the competency to then determine whether or not this person is a fit. Okay. Now, this is an art, not a science. Hiring is something which is tremendously difficult to do. And so the other aspect that you need to be able to employ if you're going to be successful in hiring is a degree of humility. And this is how the humility works. I have a job that I need to be fit, that I need to fill. I hire someone for that job, and 30, 60, or 90 days in, I realize this person is not a fit for the job. Then you have to humble yourself right there and say, okay, this person's not a fit. I am not serving them if I allow them to stay, and I'm definitely not serving my organization. I need to make a change. Because one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they hire the wrong person, they put them in the wrong position, and then they let them stay there for too much time, and that costs them a tremendous amount of time and money, and it also affects the morale of the organization.
No, absolutely. If somebody who's not qualified or is not doing the job right and everybody else sees that they get away with it, it just kind of spreads.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it can take out entire departments or, entire companies.
Yep.
It's kind of sad to see. So, I think people are really key to the success of the organization. And I think a lot of business owners, especially construction business owners, realize that.
Yes.
But how do we make sure that the right people are in the right place?
Yeah, you have to evaluate it. You really do. And again, one thing that you do is that if you tolerate highly skilled technical people who are jerks in your company, and a lot of construction companies do that, right? Mm-hmm. If you're tolerating that, you have to understand the cost. So it's easy for me as a consultant to say you shouldn't let someone who's not a cultural fit stay in your company. You may say, Eric, easy for you to say, but this guy knows how to operate this piece of equipment. And so I'm going to let them stay, and I'm just going to bubble them and cocoon them. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you've got to understand that people aren't stupid. They see that. And so if you talk culture over here, but you tolerate jerk over there, that's what your culture is. And if you're good with that, then fine, accept it and explain it to people. But don't lie to yourself saying our culture is this when your actions show that your culture is not that. It's something else.
Wow, there's a lot. But if somebody wanted to reach out to you to find out more about your coaching and the things that you offer, where would they go?
Yeah, you can just go to my website, constructiongenius.com. I have a book, Construction Genius. I have a course, The Shift. I also have a podcast with over 330 episodes. A lot of people get to know me just through, listening to my podcast. They get to know me by reading my book. Those are great ways to get to know me. You can also go to my website, and if you want to chat about your leadership challenges, or you have someone yourself or someone else who needs some coaching, you can book in a 10-minute conversation with me. I know I'm not a fit for everyone, and I'm, like I said earlier, if your company is on fire, don't contact me because I'm not a fit for you. I can't fix your business if it's on fire. That's not my gig. But if you're a high performer and you're looking to take it to the next level, then I'm a perfect fit for you if you're in construction, because I have tons of experience working with exactly those types of people.
That's awesome. And your book's available on Amazon too, right?
Yeah. $19.99. It's the best $20 you're ever going to spend.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.